You being low maintenance isn't a flex. It's a survival strategy that never got updated. And before you rush to say, I just don't ask for much, do the ritual. Like the video, subscribe, comment something defensive like, this isn't about me. Share it with someone who prides themselves on being easy to deal with and secretly feels invisible. There, now we can talk. Being low maintenance didn't start as a personality trait. It started as a solution. At some point, you learned that needing less made you safer, quieter, easier to keep, less likely to be rejected, ignored, or labeled as a problem. So you adapted. You stopped asking, stopped expressing, stopped insisting. You learned how to be okay with whatever was offered. You learned how to be grateful instead of honest. You learned how to downplay disappointment before anyone else noticed it, and people liked that version of you. They praised it. You're so chill. You're so easy. You don't need much. That reinforcement matters, because when the world rewards you for disappearing gently, you learn to disappear efficiently. Being low maintenance taught people that you'd be fine without effort, without reassurance, without follow-through, without consistency. And now you're shocked that no one is giving those things to you. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Low maintenance doesn't make you respected. It makes you easy to deprioritize. Not because people are evil, because humans respond to what's required. If you never require anything, nothing gets offered. You told everyone you were fine, so they believed you. You said, it's okay, so they stopped checking. You said, I don't need much, so they gave you the minimum, and you participated in that dynamic every step of the way. That's the part that hurts. You weren't ignored. You made yourself ignorable. You trained people how to treat you by showing them you'd accept less without complaint. And now you're quietly resentful because you're exhausted from carrying everything alone while pretending you don't mind. You mind. You always have. You just didn't feel allowed to say it. Being low maintenance often comes from environments where needs were inconvenient, where asking too much meant conflict, where expressing disappointment meant punishment, where emotions weren't welcomed, so you learned to self-soothe, self-manage, self-abandon quietly. You learned to be grateful instead of supported, independent instead of connected, and independence became your armor. But armor gets heavy when you wear it too long. You don't ask for help. You don't ask for clarity. You don't ask for reassurance. You wait. You hope. You tell yourself, if they wanted to, they would. And when they don't, you swallow the disappointment and call it maturity. It's not maturity. It's avoidance. Avoidance of the risk that comes with needing something from someone. Because needing something would mean admitting you care, admitting vulnerability, admitting the possibility of rejection, so you'd rather say you don't need anything. But not needing anything has a cost. You become the afterthought, the optional one, the one people assume is fine. You don't get checked on. You don't get followed up with. You don't get prioritized. And people think they're respecting your independence while you're slowly disappearing inside the relationship. You don't feel chosen. You feel tolerated. And that hurts in a way you don't talk about. Because being low maintenance also means being low complaint, low expression, low demand. You never make a fuss. You never push. You never insist. So no one learns where your edges are. They don't know what matters to you. They don't know what hurts you. They don't know what you need, because you never made it visible. And now you're angry that no one seems to get you. But there's nothing to get. You hid it. Another layer people don't like admitting. Being low maintenance keeps you morally superior. You get to say, at least I'm not needy. At least I'm not dramatic. At least I'm not high maintenance like other people. That superiority protects you from the shame of wanting, because wanting feels risky. Wanting feels exposed. Wanting feels like asking someone else to decide your worth. So you don't want, or you want quietly, privately, safely. You hope people will notice, anticipate, offer. And when they don't, you tell yourself, well, I didn't say anything. That sentence sounds reasonable. It also keeps you alone. You don't get points for not asking. You don't get rewarded for silence. You don't get intimacy without expression. Low maintenance isn't attractive in the long run. It's confusing. People don't know how to show up for you because you've told them you don't need them to, so they don't, and then you feel unseen. But being seen requires being specific. Being known requires being revealed. Being valued requires letting people know what matters. Low maintenance erases all of that. You become agreeable instead of authentic, adaptable instead of honest, easy instead of real. And real connection can't form around that. You also start resenting people for not meeting needs you never voiced. You think, if they cared, they'd know. But care doesn't equal mind reading. You're not being misunderstood. You're being undercommunicated. Another hard truth. Being low maintenance is often about control. If you don't ask, you can't be rejected. If you don't need, you can't be disappointed. If you don't express, you can't be told no. So you stay in control by staying quiet. But control costs intimacy. Because intimacy requires negotiation, and negotiation requires asking for things that might not be given. So you avoid that entire process and call it independence. You tell yourself you're strong, self-sufficient, unbothered, but underneath that is fear. Fear of being too much, fear of being a burden, fear of being told you're asking for too much. So you ask for nothing, and that becomes the relationship. One-sided, uneven, deprived. You don't feel cherished. You feel replaceable. Because you've made yourself optional. Low maintenance doesn't inspire investment. It signals that investment isn't necessary. People invest where there is presence, where there are edges, where there are needs, not chaos, not drama. Needs, clear ones. You don't need to be high maintenance. You need to be honest maintenance. And honesty feels dangerous when you've built your identity around being easy. Because if you stop being easy, you might find out who was only there because you were convenient. And that possibility is terrifying. So you keep things comfortable for everyone else and uncomfortable for yourself. You minimize, you rationalize, you self-soothe. You tell yourself it's not that big of a deal until it is. Until you feel chronically unsatisfied, chronically unseen, chronically tired. Not because you do too much, because you receive too little. You've been surviving on scraps and calling it contentment. You don't need to become demanding. You need to become visible. You don't need to be dramatic. You need to be clear. You don't need to overwhelm people. You need to stop underrepresenting yourself. Because right now, being low maintenance is costing you connection, reciprocity, and the basic experience of being considered. And the saddest part? You think this makes you easier to love. It doesn't. It makes you easier to forget. Not advice, not a pep talk. Just the truth behind why being easy keeps leaving you empty.